Good evening from BBC Points West. For better or worse, hundreds of business leaders gather tonight for the region's biggest EU debate so far.
There's obviously going to be an enormous number of problems coming out. Why do it?
At the moment, we have 55% of the trade with non-EU countries, and that is growing, and that trade is in surplus. It doesn't make sense to have our trade policy dictated to us by the EU.
Hundreds of business leaders have been gathering in Bristol tonight in the biggest event of the EU referendum campaign in the West so far. Both sides claimed a vote for them would boost jobs and prosperity. But what did the people who run the region's companies make of that? Our business correspondent Dave Harvey has been at Colston Hall for us tonight.
800 had registered for an evening promising more light than heat. A former foreign secretary put the case for staying in Europe,
which you use to decide whether a country is sovereign and independent state.
While a one-time advisor to the Bank of England argued the merits of leaving.
If we're not in the European Union, we can still trade with our European neighbours. In fact, China is not in the European Union, and China exports more to the EU than Britain does. So we don't have to be in the EU to trade with our neighbours.
Britain could trade with any country in the world, including European countries, if we weren't in the European Union. But it's the question of the tariffs we might have to pay, the extra burden which would make our companies in the southwest, as well as elsewhere in Britain, no longer competitive when competing with German or French or other companies.
They heard firsthand from people who make passenger jets and hot air balloons, digital entrepreneurs and accountants. All agreed we must continue trading with Europe. The question is, how?
The fact that there isn't a model of what's going to happen when we come out was a very important factor, so that nobody's saying whether it's going to be the Canadian example or the Norwegian example or the World Trade Organization. And there's obviously going to be an enormous number of problems coming out. Why do it?
I've grown up in the European Union and there's no reason why I would want to change. Secondly, I think the workers' rights is very important. There's lots of legislation that's important to everybody, and the reason to change it isn't really clear, I don't think.
But for those who would leave, it comes down to one principle: total, undiluted sovereignty.
Personally, the ability to be able to sign free trade agreements with the rest of the world. At the moment, all our trade deal is done within the EU. We are one voice amongst 28, so we can't get trade agreements that are tailored for our own interests.
I employ lots of people from Eastern Europe. The majority of the people in my company, we employ around about 50 people. The majority are from Eastern Europe, so I'm all in favour of that, but I'm also in favour of controlling it. Just like I control my own business, I'd like my own parliament that I vote for controlling my own country.
Plenty of arguments then on both sides of this debate, but in this audience, at least according to this organisation's own survey, opinion is moving towards the Remain side by a factor, they say, of 3 to 1. But with just a week to go till the referendum, plenty of people are still making up their minds. This is Dave Harvey from BBC Points West in Bristol.